Most parents are doing way better than they think they're doing. There's so much information out there, and we think, oh, we're messing up our kids. But in terms of emotional health, the number one predictor of resilience and emotional health in children and adolescents coming into their adult years is a connected relationship with a healthy adult.
Hello, guys. It's Mindi Linscombe, your host of the Something New show. Welcome back to where we like to dive into learning how to live a life worth celebrating. And today I have one of my friends that in real life, we got to know each other a few years ago, but she is a professional and an entrepreneur and a mom and a wife that I adore and know, like I said, personally. And I'm sad to say, has moved back to her home country because now she's no longer in the United States and nearby, but she now lives back at home in Australia. So today is the first ever virtual interview on the Something New show. Normally our guests are in the studio, but today I don't even know what time it is in Australia, but Sarah has agreed to interview with me at a normal time in the US. So Sarah, I apologize for if I woke you up in the middle of the night to do this interview today. What time is it for you?
You're so kind. I would do anything for you, Mindy. It is 5 a.m. at this, so it was a little bit of an early morning, but we were good. We're good and ready to go.
Okay, well after this, hopefully you can like ease into the day.
Yeah. It's like the best thing. I get to chat with you first thing, and then it's like a best start of the day.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. It means a lot to have you on here. I respect the work you and Colin both do, and it's been a privilege to celebrate all the different, achievements, but also some wins in your family life and all over the years. It's been really great. So I just want to quickly introduce people to you. Sarah Boyd is a writer, an entrepreneur, and a child and adolescent development expert. She is the founder of Resilient Little Hearts, a movement dedicated to empowering parents, teachers, and professionals to cultivate resilience and emotional health in children. This community has quickly grown to hundreds of thousands of people, and it currently offers education on the topics of high sensitivity, overcoming fear and anxiety, emotionally healthy parenting, and building resilience in children. Sarah holds a master's degree in educational psychology, and a diploma of neuroscience of leadership. She's married to Colin, and they have two amazing children. And she just came out with another amazing book called Turn Down the Noise, and it is available wherever books are sold. And if you want to find Sarah, you can start to look at her amazing Instagram, Resilient Little Hearts, also her website, sarahboyd.co. We will put all of that in the details of the show afterwards. But man, I can't wait to dive into this topic because just last night at the dinner table, we were having explosions at our dinner table. In fact, I'm going to tell you what happened, Sarah, because then you're going to analyze me. But basically, we said we want we want everybody to sit down at dinner tonight, and nobody wanted to sit down at the table with a family of six because they were mad at someone else. So as soon as somebody would come to the table, another person would pop up and get out off get away, and so it was like musical chairs because it was like one person would finally come to the table and then one person would leave, and I was like, wow, when everybody finally came, you know what I did? I was so sassy. When all the kids finally sat down, I left. And I got away from the table. I was like, all right, I made you all wait and made me wait. Now I'm gonna make you wait. Anyways, playful parenting, but it's real life. And I want to say
That's
thank
the
you for
best.
being here and thanks for being somebody I can look to give me advice so I don't, behave that way.
I love it. Don't you love family life? I feel like if it doesn't make you laugh, it makes you cry.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes, you
So
have to
anyway,
have a laugh about it.
you have to have a laugh. So, I just would love for you to dive straight into, why you wrote this book, but it's because it's the topic I really want to peel back today. So, when you started Turn Down the Noise, I want you to tell me, like, hey, what caused you, and maybe it's your own family situation, but like maybe not, maybe it's just talking to all the families you work with. What caused you to venture down this path of studying this whole topic of overstimulation and things like that?
Yeah, so I think it's no kind of secret that we're seeing, mental health problems increase in children and adolescents over the past decade. We're seeing also an increase in attentional diagnoses like ADHD and things like that. Parents are also reporting that they're more stressed out and burnt out than generations previously. And obviously, those topics are like multifaceted. There is the element of some people have come from trauma, or there's different, situations with that. But I felt like what people weren't paying enough attention to is what overstimulation can do to a child and teen's brain, what it can do to a parent, and then if it's not navigated, it can then lead to chronic stress. And that's where we see parents who are burnt out, the big emotional explosions chronically in family life, and all of that sort of stuff. And so I wanted to kind of offer a perspective that maybe we haven't thought about, of a way of looking at kids and teens behaviors, way of looking at what we're experiencing as parents, for the purpose of a practical way to navigate it in modern life.
So I was thinking about even a lot of the listeners on here, they're working parents. And sometimes we think the stress is coming from work, but is it possible that it's coming from other places and not work?
Yeah, so I think it comes from lots of places. One of the things that happened with work is, if you think two generations ago, we didn't have the interconnectivity. So there was an element of boundaries that happened and limits that happened, where you would go to work, you'd do your work there, and you'd come home and be with your family. And so I think that that's blurred over the last little few years. Definitely work can be a stress. Dealing with challenging children and having like it be overstimulating for the parent themselves, family life can be really stressful at times, and for a lot of people in a lot of different seasons. And it can be anything else that you're navigating, whether it's just the gamut of life that we go through. Sometimes it's like, you've gone through something massive, and you've got grief. Maybe it's like you're dealing with a health thing. So, the thing about stress is it's typically not just one situation. Like, if you think about, if you're in a situation where you have a challenging child, and you're going through a season with them, that doesn't just affect the home, it then affects oftentimes your marriage or your partner. It affects like extended family. It affects sometimes even your work, because sometimes you might have to be taking them to different therapies or different things, and you're having to make sacrifices there. So no stress in our life sits independent, it all kind of morphs together. And it's the chronic buildup of it all. So you might be able to isolate and say, well, my work's not too stressful today, but sometimes it's the chronic buildup of all the things over time that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid observation because when I think about most of the arguments that Jordan and I have are not necessarily pertinent to work, even though we are full time entrepreneurs together, which you would think, oh, there's got to be conflict there. But we're very united when it comes to that. What I would say most of our stress comes from is parenting. Like it's
Yeah.
challenging it is exhausting to keep, supporting 4 children, all
Mm,
under the age of 16. So there's a lot of dynamics and a lot of personalities, and the way we react and respond to them are different because we're so different as humans,
mm,
and even the amount of stress and capacity we have is different. So I would say,
mm.
where something might not really bother me over a long period of time, maybe it bothers Jordan or vice versa. Something doesn't bother him, but it bothers me in the children's behavior. And so it's like, oh, a lot of tension can come from the
Mm.
parenting element, even though most people will be like, "Oh, it's because you're working parents." I'm like, I really don't think it's because we work. I think it's the difficulty of the dynamic of the relationships and the people we're raising. It's like that's a
Yeah.
lot of u- unique circumstances.
Yeah, well, because I think something we talk about, but all our children come to us with different temperaments. So we don't get to kind of choose who they are at their essence. It's our role to kind of meet them at who they are and help them as themselves grow into health and maturity. But like you said, you've got different temperaments, and some temperaments are sensitive, some are explosive, some are like, they're going to be amazing leaders one day, but they love to challenge. And like you said, sometimes they need different responses from us. And so all of that is can be a lot to manage. And if you are navigating, for those listening, if you've got a child who has a neurodivergent diagnosis, so the autism, ADHD, dyslexia, anything like that, that can be quite a challenge because a lot of times those children need different strategies in the home to thrive and respond to your family values and boundaries. And so I talk about a lot of the times with emotional tools and parenting tools, you have to have a toolbox because if you just have one hammer and that's your one thing you just do over and over and over again, that definitely works in some situations and with maybe one of your children, but it doesn't work contextually across all of it. So you kind of have to meet the child where they're at and adjust a little bit for the goal of still bringing them into maturity and character development.
I love that. Well, can we hop into that topic of overstimulation because I think that that's a real essence of your work, right? A lot of your studies has been around that and maybe if you could define overstimulation, what are the signs of it? How do we know it's coming up? Like is this an issue that we need to really be aware of? I would love to hear you talk into that topic.
Yeah. So, overstimulation, neuroscientists sometimes call it cognitive frazzle. It's when all of your senses, your five senses, and I've done this so many times, but I should know it, your sight, sound, taste, hearing, oh my
Touch.
goodness, all of the thank you, the five senses get to a threshold that you feel like you experience um, cognitive frazzle, like brain fog, you can't think straight, you feel like you can't put two and two together. Typically, it erupts into an emotional explosion because it's just like you've been building stress underneath the surface. So there is screaming, crying, sometimes from the adults as well as the children.
I was sorry, talking to
Emo-
the parents or the kids.
yeah, emotional meltdowns. Particularly in children, you'll see it. They get very sweaty and clammy. They start talking really fast. You might see hyperactive type of behavior, the type of behavior that you feel like, I need you to settle down, but they're not just listening. They're not able to hear you. You feel like you're sharing what you want and they're just not doing it. That is when you've hit the peak of like overstimulation. And sometimes parents misread children's behavior or even teens' behavior as just like they're being defiant, they're trying to throw a tantrum and get their way. And that's true in some cases. But in other cases, it's actually that they've hit a threshold limit of all of the stress and stimulation that they've experienced in the day. And their brain is no, it's their brain, the rational part of their brain kind of goes offline. So the way you can kind of see it with children, if you want to like think about the difference between a tantrum or defiance and this overstimulation, a lot of the core of a tantrum with a child is them trying to get their way. So if you are just like, mum and dad, I want that toy or that video game at the store, and you say no, and they start all their behavior, the screaming, the crying, depending on the age, the talking back, the all of that, and if you were to say, not that you would, but if you were to say, sure, you can go and get that, that behavior would stop. So it would be instantly like, I'm really happy. The child's in control of what they're doing. Overstimulation is different when they hit that peak and they hit the behavior and you're in that situation. It doesn't matter what you do. You could give them the thing you think they might want. The behavior is still there. And that's a sign that they've hit that threshold. And there are people who struggle with it more than others. So, anyone with the trait of high sensitivity, those who have a neurodivergent diagnosis, those who have a history of trauma tend to struggle with overstimulation more than others. But it's definitely something that we all do because family life is overstimulating.
Yeah, well, I was just starting to think of if I could recognize those signs even in myself as I am very frustrated. And I'm so, I have to, as an entrepreneur and as a mom and a professional of many years, it's like you have to kind of be withholding of your emotions and stay steady and calm for work, right?
Mm.
And so I try to stay with that same steady calm at home, but sometimes it's hard. It's very hard
Yes.
and I can feel myself tensing up and getting
Mm.
very upset. And I don't really know what to do with that in that moment. Like, what do you tell parents to do when they're having these you can see it, like, you can feel it, you can see it. Maybe you see it of your spouse and they can't even see it. Like, what are some
Mm.
things that we can do to self-regulate?
Yeah. No, I love that you share that. And so I think the first thing that important to acknowledge is that, like, even what you said in that example of like you're holding steady the whole day, that is still draining cognitive resources from you. So we've got to simplify it, we have two parts of our brain. The prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain that keeps us steady, makes us mature, it makes us make good decisions, it helps us to regulate our emotions. And then the other part of our brain is the limbic brain. So it's the part that's just having all the feelings and emotions like unregulated, unrestricted. It's all the things you want to say to that
That's the
person, but
very
you
yeah,
didn't
it's the
say.
weird part of your brain.
So the challenge is that the prefrontal cortex, the part that makes us a healthy human being, it has a limited capacity before it needs rest and to regain its capacity again. So if we've spent a lot of that capacity, say you've had a stressful day at work and you may have kept that even keel at work, one thing that we sometimes don't pay attention to is we've drained that capacity cognitively from our prefrontal cortex. And then we come home and we feel like we have nothing left. So, one of the kind of things I share in the book, and it's a strategy as well as just kind of understanding your own emotions, is the strategy is called interrupt the build up. So essentially, what we have is when you have a stressful situation like what you were sharing, it's not just like you go from 0 to 100. It's like what you said. You've had a stressful day at work. You've come home. You've tired. You look. Oh no, there's not the stuff for dinner. That's annoying. The child's talking back to me. I had to do school run 50 times. I had to drive them around. And what's happening is if you think of your own emotions or your own anger or your own whatever as a scale of 0 to 10. And 10 is like the volcano erupts, whatever that looks like for you. It's like that's when you yell, that's when you lose your temper. What's happening over those times is you're slowly creeping up numbers. You're slowly, there's the work day has taken you up to a 6 already, or maybe then the fact that there's no dinner, you're at a 7. Then the child talks back, you're at an 8. And so you're already using a lot of cognitive resources to hold, to try and be mature, to hold it together. And when you have that eruption, it's because it's been building for a really long time. So essentially the strategy interrupt the build up is paying a little bit of attention to your emotions and having a think about not waiting until you're a 9 or 10 out of 10 to kind of take yourself off and have a little break, but to actually pay attention when you're a 6 or a 7 out of 10, where you can feel that you're finding yourself agitated and annoyed, but you still feel like you have the capacity to stop a response or a reaction. And that's the point to intervene. And it can be just removing yourself from the situation momentarily, like what you did. I actually love what you did, like last night at dinner, Mindy, because you like removed yourself from the situation and it's like, then you just do something to change your emotional state. So for some people, they like it to do something to calm down. Some people love to do, watch something funny or have a laugh or call a friend or, whatever the time element you have. But actually doing something before that will increase your capacity to then navigate your emotions after it. Because if you can bring that 6 or 7 out of 10 down to a 4 or 5 again. And so some strategies can look like running your wrists under cold water is a cold water strategy you can use in the moment. Anything cold or heat, so having a really cold drink or a really hot cup of tea, standing in front of I say to parents all the time, stand in front of your fridge or freezer, sit in front of the air conditioning if that works for you, or anything that's just like walk outside, water your garden, smell the roses or something, and just remove yourself, because sometimes we think going head to head with the stressor all the time is the right thing to do, but actually to kind of navigate ourselves, to give our brain that breathing space, we need to take a break.
Well, and I love what you said when you said, "When is the time for that?" You identified, you said, "When you're upset by it, but you're still able to make a decision on whether you react or respond." So when you still have the power to not just leash out, your anger, you still are there and you're like, "Okay, I'm really agitated by this, but I can have a controlled tongue." So that's the moment, and I think that's a little earlier than most of us are thinking about it.
Yeah, because we're often in the moment as parents especially. We are like coming home from work, we think we feel okay until we hit the response like the situation where, we've got the kids. And I will say that's often too why children come home and lose it after school. It's a very normal thing for children and teens, and the way they lose it looks differently depending on the child and their age, but essentially they're holding themselves together just like we do at work, and they're trying to be even keel, and they're trying to be cool with their friends, and they're trying to hopefully listen to their teacher and pay attention in school. And so it's really normal for many children when they come home, it's like that. Oh, and then all the feelings come out, and all of the decompression of their day comes out. And then we meet that when a lot of times we've had a stressful day as well. And it in and of itself, those night times and afternoons are a recipe for like lots of explosions. So first of all, I want to normalize it for parents. It's not a sign of bad parenting. It is not a sign that you're doing a bad job. It's actually just a normal reaction to stress, and a normal reaction of, especially for kids, decompressing of their day. And then the more we can kind of learn strategies to navigate ourselves so we can meet our stressed out child or teen with our calm, we can help them grow into that kind of maturity.
What are, switching gears here for a second, you've given me a lot to think of, and I want to maybe end with my thought that I have about, a new practice to implement that I'd love your approval on. But before we get to that, let's go into the freaking out child. Let's just go there. Let's go to the fact that, like, sometimes our child is not, able to control their senses and they're at the 10. What do we do in those moments? Like, equip us, Sarah, with like what is the right way to approach those moments?
Looking for the perfect vacation spot to disconnect from everything, put your feet in the softest sand, and enjoy a fresh, renovated 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhouse right on the beach in my favorite place in the world? Well, 30A is situated in the panhandle of Florida, and I'd love for you to check out Something Blue 30A on Instagram and make it the perfect place for your next vacation.
So, when your child is emotionally escalated, it's not the time to teach them your important life lessons. You actually have to de escalate them first before you can then share your values and boundaries. And so that looks different depending on the age of the child. If they're really, really little, you can scoop them up and give them a hug. If they're, say, elementary school age, that could be sitting with them on the ground and playing with them. It could be giving them a hug. It could be giving them space, particularly for our teens. A lot of the time, it's like giving them that little bit of space, giving them some snacks, telling them that let's go for a walk together or something like that. And then once they've kind of de-escalated, you're then able to talk to them about what's going on for them or what's their behavior. Because I think one thing that's important to mention is sometimes when we see our child having a meltdown, whether they're crying a lot or they're having this huge anger outburst, we can take it too seriously. We can think, oh no, my child's going to grow up and be someone who's too sensitive and never do anything, or they're so self-focused, they're never going to be there for other people, or is my child going to end up on a Netflix documentary one day because their anger is so out of control. But so much of it is just normal in the development of a child and a teen. Their brain, so that part of the brain I was talking about before, the prefrontal cortex, that doesn't come to full development until between 18 and 25 years old. So it's really normal for your like little kids to have tantrums, for your tweens to backtalk you, for your teens to make decisions that you want to pull your hair out at and think, what are you doing? Like, and it's not to say that that's not hard to navigate in the moment, but it's important to know that's not a reflection of quote unquote bad parenting. It's also not a reflection of whether your child will carry on your family values. One of the core things is when a child feels connected to their parents, they're going to become a lot of the time who you are. So it's less about what we say and more about how we live in terms of raising children with our values.
Ooh, that gave me chills. For the parent that's thinking, am I a terrible mom or I'm a terrible dad? Like, don't the good people have good kids that never do this?
Yeah.
And so tell me what you would describe an emotionally healthy child as, because perhaps many of us do have emotionally healthy children, but we're being really hard on ourselves. Like, could you describe and maybe quantify, like, how do you evaluate a child that is doing okay in an emotionally healthy capacity?
Yeah. Most parents are doing way better than they think they're doing. I think sometimes there's so much information out there and we think, oh, we're messing up our kids, but there has to be only extreme circumstances to really, really harm children. And so in terms of emotional health, the number one predictor of resilience and emotional health in children and adolescents coming into their adult years is a connected relationship with a healthy adult. So most of my work centers around how can we become healthier and how can we continue to build connection with the kids and teens in our world. And secondly, when we think about what emotional and mental health is, it's not about feeling happy all the time, because that that's not healthy. Emotional health is having appropriate emotions for the context. If your best friend had something horrible happen to them and they weren't devastated and upset and dealing with all of those emotions, you would think something's terribly wrong. It's the same with our kids. Mental and emotional health is actually having appropriate emotions for the context and then knowing what to do with them. And that knowing what to do with them is kind of what we train our children in across the brevity of their childhood and adolescence, where we say, hey, when you feel sad, it's good to talk to safe people. When you feel angry, it's good to have healthy ways of getting that anger out and then thinking about what's going on. When you feel happy, it's so good to enjoy that with people that you love. When you feel moved by something, like that's sometimes a sign that you can do something to serve other people. And that kind of training that happens across the whole of childhood and adolescence. So essentially, when we're looking at children and teens, are they emotionally healthy? Do they have connected relationships with healthy adults? And are we just normalizing emotions? It's normal to feel and have those meltdowns. As much as we want to project these perfect images to other people, or we see them everywhere else, our kids are always best behaved outside of the house. And then we see everything on social media. It can lead us to falsely believe that everyone has it together. But if you ever go to someone's house in real life with kids or teens, no one has their house perfectly put together. No one has like everything going well with all of their children all of the time. There is always something going on. And so one of the things I wish is that parents would give themselves more grace. And I hope I can say it and encourage you, because parenting is one of those roles that our children don't turn around and say, hey, thanks so much for giving me that boundary that will make me thrive 10 years from now. Thanks so much for doing all those things. And so we don't get that feedback that we get in a work situation. We get the feedback in work. At home, we're just like giving, giving, giving. Is it good? They're screaming at us for doing what we feel like is the right thing. And I just want parents out there to know you're doing a way better job than you think you are.
That's incredible, encouraging words. And I think when you say to focus on, first of all, becoming a healthy person with your emotions, right? That's something we can do. We have resources, free and paid, to become a healthier person. And then staying connected to our kids, because I'll say this for a lot of us, life is crazy. They're in activities. And before you know it, you're tucking them in at night, but I will say is like having those moments to really, whether it's 5 minutes or 15, it's like you can spend that 5 minutes just like chilling and not talking, or you can spend that 5 minutes really saying, hey, what happened today? Like, you seem different. Like, is everything good? Or, whatever your inquiring minds want to know. But it's like, I would say my time is limited, but I try to be so intentional with the time that I have and ask the hard questions, because I do want to be connected, or
Yes.
painfully waking up early in the morning when you're my 15-year-old goes to weightlifting before school, but I'm like, hey, if I can see him before school and ask him a few things while he's grabbing his protein shake, like I'm going to make that connection, So it's
Yes.
just intentional connectivity. I love that you said that because, I don't know if I'm doing it right. So I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
thank you for echoing the sentiment that it's more about that than it is about maybe the picture perfect, you know, a rhythm of the day where we did this and then that, and
Yeah.
it looks
No,
beautiful.
because when we look at research, psychologists have this term called co-regulation, which is where our children really need us to grow in their own health and also calm their emotions. So you might hear it talked about in little years. So co-regulation is when the baby's crying and they need you to pick them up and soothe them in order for them to calm down, or the 2-year-old's having a tantrum and they need mum and dad to scoop in and pick them up in order to be okay. Most parents think that that peaks when children are little and just slowly goes down for the rest of childhood and adolescence, but it's actually a U curve. So it peaks from 0 to 5 years and then kind of, dips a little bit in those, quote unquote easier years between like maybe 5 to 7 years old all the way up until we hit adolescence. But it actually peaks again in the teen years. And so obviously the way our teens need us is different than when they were really little, but they still really need us in their life. And that is a challenge because they are often showing behaviors that are pushing us away all of the time. And so parents think, how do I do this? They don't want to be around me. And also teens by that stage they already know what we think about most things. Like they already know our family values. They already know what mum and dad are going to say if they do this and that. And so it really is a change where we have to come and meet them. And so one of the things I would often say to parents as the kids get older is those little moments that you're talking about are just so important to connect with them. And then if you have anything that's like an activity you all enjoy, like you and your teen enjoy, it's just, and it doesn't have to be expensive or big. It could be riding bikes together, going on a late night walk. It could be, like doing, I don't know, board games together, like something that's kind of special. It doesn't have to happen every day. It could happen once a week or once every 2 weeks, but that's just something that you and your teen have together that can go a really long way of just making them and you both feel kind of connected, as opposed to, if you always just feel like you're fighting with teens, it can feel like you start to feel like I love you, but do I like you? And they, they start to feel this mum and dad annoyed at me all the time. But those moments of connection are just so, so important. And building that kind of playful fun into the relationship as well can be really beneficial to them, even being softer towards you and more open towards you as well.
Okay, so good. Well, with our time left, I would like to ask you, because I so trust your thoughts on this, and as a mom and a professional, what are your thoughts around screen time?
Yes. So I outlay in the book a kind of framework around screen time. And obviously I think in the recent years, I'm so glad that the research is becoming more public knowledge. I've always been very strict with screen time in my own home. Um, it is one of those things that is a nuanced topic though, because I get concerned sometimes of like some people are extreme, and also most parents feel guilt about the screen time that they use. So it's important just to have, what I basically do is outline a framework in the book and then also say, if it doesn't look like this all the time, that's okay. We all get to points where we've realized, hey, there's too much screen time going on. We need to pull it back a little bit. But essentially for multiple reasons. Number one is the stimulation of the type of screen time that the child or teen is watching. Number two is the length of time that they're watching. You want to make it really, really slow. So as much as possible, no screen time under 18 months to 2 years. When they're in those little years, maybe an hour a day, and you want to kind of grade the stimulation of the show. So if they're watching something more like a low stimulating TV show, rather than swiping YouTube or seeing that kind of really fast content, Probably, though, where you're going to have the most amount of fights in the home around screen time is as they get into upper elementary and into the older years. And so this is all I would say. Hopefully, it's becoming less controversial now. From a psychological and brain development point of view, I would avoid trying to give, or not, I would try to avoid giving a child a smartphone with internet attached to it. Try to get to as close as 14 years old as possible. So I know that that's not always the case, and you might be listening and think, oh no, I've given it earlier. There's things you can do around it, but when you give a child unrestricted access internet wise, there's a whole lot of research, and Jonathan Haidt's, if you've seen his work, he's really put it together in a really comprehensive way. If you can hold off for that, and then also social media as close to 16 as possible. Now, you know, if you've got a child who you're like, I know them, the temperament's different, we've given them a little bit early, that's different. But what I really want parents to avoid is just handing a child a smartphone when they're 7 years old and they ask for it for the first time, or trying to hold off on those things. Because what we see in the research is the longer you can hold off, like 14, 16 and higher, it significantly reduces their rates of anxiety, depression, suicidality, eating disorders in girls. Like, it just drops substantially. And that comes down to their brain development. Like I was talking before, their brain is still in development. So I kind of see screens, especially the phones and social media, a little bit like one of those, you know, this might be controversial to say, but I'm just going to say it. It's a little bit like alcohol. You know, when alcohol was around previous generations, like there would be children young as 9 and 10 drinking it. It would seem like it was like non-harmful. And then the studies came out to show, hey, no, because they're in a vulnerable brain development time, you really need to wait until they're an adult and then only have it healthily. Social media, when it first came out, it was the same. It was like, have all for everyone. It's not going to harm anyone, until we've seen, now we've got the research and studies to show it is harmful in vulnerable brain development time. And then hopefully as they get older, they can use it in healthy ways. So I say all of that to say that's the research. I do outlay a more robust framework in the book, but it is something that we need to pay attention to. Is at minimum, what we want to have is families with boundaries in their home. So no matter what your boundaries look like, the biggest thing is do not have unrestricted access to screens, and do not do not let your kids have screens in their bedroom. If you're like, Sarah, all of this is too much, you know, all of you are talking about, maybe you've given them smartphones too early. They're the two things I would say, is have some kind of boundaries, some kind of off time, and keep screens in family communal places. That in and of itself will protect children and teens significantly.
I love it. I love it so much. You have given me a lot to think about today and a lot to go back and talk with Jordan about and just make sure, hey, are we on the same page? You know, I'm definitely going to listen to your book. In fact, one of our producers in the studio downloaded it while we were recording today because they can't wait to listen to more. This is just such an important talk because one day these kids are going to be gone and we're going to be like, oh, we weren't intentional with that time. And I really desire for my family and the people I know to, when they, you know, retire and move on to the other side, and one day it's they look back and say, hey, I did the best I could do, not perfect, but I did the best I could do with the knowledge I had to raise intentional kids for our society that care about their family and their community. And so, you know, this is great conversation. I mean, I could totally see a part 2 to this, 100%. It's so good. And like I said, you've given me a lot to talk about with my spouse today. So if you're a working parent or even just somebody that does feel overstimulated at times, even as an adult, I think this book is just for you. Turn down the noise. I mean, follow Sarah Boyd and
all the important work she's doing. It's really, really important work. So I had like 10 more questions I was going to ask you, but because of time today, I am going to say thank you so much for joining us. And if you guys have more questions, definitely comment on this episode and leave some questions. We can always circle back to Sarah for follow-up questions. You can DM her, I'm sure. This is just an exciting time in life to have the knowledge to be able to say, hey, we've learned some things, because this is new information that we didn't always have. So we're very fortunate to take that knowledge, but then with knowledge comes responsibility. So now we have to do the right thing with it. So thank you, Sarah, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Mindy. I always love chatting with you. You are a joy and an encouragement every single time I get to talk to you.
Well, I feel the same. I feel the same. And we're just waving across the pond. Okay. All right. You
Yes.
have an awesome day in Australia. We love you guys. Join us next time on the Something New show. We can't wait to continue these great conversations around living a life worth celebrating. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow The Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.